All rise, LA County Court's now in session. The Honorable Blake Adams presiding.
Thank you, everyone. You may be seated. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Judge Blake Adams. All right. Is everyone ready to begin?
No, Your Honor, we don't have the proper, we don't have any.
Time cards?
I don't have, no, I have a time card, I don't have a timer. I was not providing.
All right.
So I have two timers. I'm supposed to time both teams, but I could time one team and next team to time the other.
Ms. Dunphy, do you have stopwatches?
I don't. I'll go upstairs and get them. So just be a minute.
In the meantime, Your Honor, may the defense hand you their team roster? Is it okay with that?
Yes, you may.
Excellent. May I approach permission to approach the bench?
Yes, you may.
Excellent.
And maybe confirm that you received Team C's roster.
I did receive Team C's. Thank you. Preliminary matters,
During this time, may we establish some preliminary matters?
Yes, go ahead.
May we move freely around the courtroom with exception to Your Honor, the jury box and the witness?
You may.
And permission, or may we assume that all witnesses were sequestered?
Yes.
And may we assume that all exhibits have been pre-marked for identification purposes? This concludes our preliminary matters.
All right. Any from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. We would also like to reiterate the stipulation that all exhibits have been stipulated as authentic in this case. What needs to be demonstrated is their relevance. As such. Besides that, there are no preliminary matters. May we inquire that we introduce our team to you at this time?
Yes, you may.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Glenn Romano Gilia, and I will be providing the opening for the defense, as well as the direct examination of Dr. Skylar Foley and the cross-examination of the witness Harley McKenna.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Rebasco Afelez, and I will be delivering the closing statement for the defense, as well as crossing Ellis Collymore and directing Bobby Polk.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Alex Duray, and I'll be conducting the direct examination of Dakota Bryant and the cross of Reagan.
Very good. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'm Greta Walter, and I'll be portraying Bobby Polk.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'm Kaylee Rushfield, and I will be portraying Dakota Bryant.
Hello, Your Honor. I'm Hannah Chowdhury, and I'll be portraying Dr. Skylar Foley.
Very good. Thank you.
Permission for the plaintiff to introduce yourselves?
Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Samantha Mahler, and I will be delivering the opening statement, as well as directing the direct examination of Ellis Collymore and the cross-examination of Bobby Polk. And my co-counsel?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Emma Buck, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Brady Polk, as well as the cross-examination of Dakota Bryant and the closing argument. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Danielle Yurkovich, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Ms. Harley McKenna, as well as the cross-examination for Dr. Skylar Foley and our witnesses.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kylie Craig, and I will be portraying the role of Ellis Collymore.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Enzo Lorenzi, and I will be portraying the role of Reagan Polk.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Olivia Harper, and I will be portraying the role of Harley McKenna.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just instruct everyone in the audience to please make sure that all electronic devices have been turned off. Just remind everyone present that no one can communicate with any of the students that are in front of the bar. And I'll also remind the audiences to please remain silent during the presentation. All right, and are the timekeepers ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Commissioner, may it please the court?
May.
Permission to move this.
Yes, you.
An uphill battle. The relationship between the Collymores and the Polks is an uphill battle. This will be shown through the Collymores' constant attempts to keep their precious preserve afloat, which was thwarted by Polk Farms, which will be shown through the facts and evidence presented today. Bobby Polk breached his duty. This duty is negligence. Negligence means that one has not acted reasonably or carefully. The burden of proof in today's case is the preponderance of the evidence, meaning a slight tipping of the scales. This means that if you are at all more than 50% sure that Bobby Polk and Polk Farms is negligent, you will find them liable. Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. My name is Samantha Mahler, and I, along with my co-counsel, Emma Buck and Danielle Yurkovich, will be presenting you with the facts and evidence that will show the irresponsible nature that Polk Farms had, and how this irresponsible nature resulted in irreversible damage to the Collymore Wildlife Preserve. Collymore Wildlife Preserve is a local wildlife preserve in Summer Creek, Florida. They've had issues with algae blooms in the past, but this all subsided once Polk Farms moved away, causing the algae blooms to move away with them. You will hear of how Collymore Wildlife Preserve blossomed, having healthy land and clean water, but this all stopped once Polk Farms moved away, but this all stopped once Polk Farms moved back in, causing the algae blooms to return with them. You will hear of the container wall, the only separating factor between Collymore Wildlife Preserve and Polk Farms. You will hear of how this container wall was owned solely by Polk Farms. And you will also hear of the massive damage that was present on this container wall, and the container wall that Polk Farms had full responsibility for. In April of 2019, Reagan Polk was hired to work at the Collymore Wildlife Preserve. And you will hear of how this hiring led members of the Collymore family to see photographic evidence of the harmful fertilizer Milorganite being used on Polk property. You will also hear of how interactions between the Collymores and the Polks led to admissions of liability by the Polks. We will explain all of this and more to you through our three witnesses: Ellis Collymore, Reagan Polk, and Harley McKenna. First, you will hear from Ellis Collymore. She will explain all of the hard work that she puts into keeping her preserve healthy and clean, and how massive damage has been present on her preserve due to Polk Farms. Ellis Collymore will also explain that the algae that occurred on her preserve was present only when Polk Farms was in business. And Ellis Collymore will also explain that she strictly instructed her workers against using Milorganite. Next, you will hear from Reagan Polk, who has had experience in both sides of the feud. Reagan Polk will explain that Bobby Polk, Reagan's half-brother and owner of Polk Farms, was a huge advocate for using loads of fertilizer before rainstorms and hurricanes. Reagan Polk will also explain that the container wall's damage was completely ignored by members of the Polk family. Reagan Polk will also explain that the algae that was present on Collymore Wildlife Preserve was located on the west side of the preserve, the same side that connected them to Polk Farms. Lastly, you will hear from expert hydrologist Harley McKenna. Harley McKenna will explain that the amount of algae that was present on Collymore Wildlife Preserve after Hurricane Annette was significantly higher than that would occur naturally. Ms. McKenna will also explain that the container wall's damage was so severe that it was unable to stop water and other substances from seeping from Polk Farms to Collymore Wildlife Preserve. You will also hear of the second charge of negligence per se. This is in reference to the local ordinance 17-235, which states that fertilizer cannot be put down within 5 days of an excessive rainstorm like a hurricane. And you will hear of how Collymore Wildlife Preserve adhered to this ordinance, and that Polk Farms simply did not. Negligence. Negligence means that one has not acted reasonably or carefully. Throughout the course of today's trial, I would like you to ask yourself these three questions. Is using excessive amounts of fertilizer before raining reasonable or careful? Is consistently using these harmful fertilizers reasonable or careful? Is ignoring a container wall's damage reasonable or careful? Remember the constant battle that the Collymores have been facing. Remember that this battle had their livelihoods at stake. Remember to find Pope Farms liable of negligence and negligence per se. Thank you.
Yes, Honor. Before I deliver my opening, while I recognize that the Montreal rules do not permit objections on openings, if I were allowed to object, I would object to plaintiff's opening as argumentative and relying on speculation.
All right, thank you. Any response?
I would have asked what exactly the opposing counsel was referring to, but because this is not a real objection.
Okay, all right, thank you.
May I approach the lectern?
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. The plaintiff got up here and told you a story. They told you the story of an uphill battle, of a feud between people. But in this case, this is not a suing between Bobby Pope and Miss Collingwood. This is a case between the Collingwood Wildlife Preserve, the company, and the Pope Farms company. Let me take you back to what actually happened. On August 8th of 2019, Hurricane Annette touched down on the county of Summer Creek, Florida. It affected two businesses primarily. The first being the Pope Farms, which is located at the top of the Moore Hill. The second business was the Collingwood Preserve, which is located at the bottom of the Moore Hill. Both businesses being connected by the Summer Creek River. Not a month after this hurricane occurred, Ellis Collingwood, head of the Collingwood Wildlife Preserve, came into the parking lot, came into the Pope Farms, screaming, red in the face, and without any evidence, without any investigation, began to blame Bobby Pope for the deaths of the animals on the preserve and for the loss of business that they allege occurred. While the defense understands the frustration that would occur upon the loss of business and the emotions that would drive a person to go after their old rival, we also believe that conviction alone, that blaming someone alone, should not condemn them. My name is Glenn Ramon Ogilia, and I, along with my co-counsel, Alexandre Serrier, and Ravel Scalafalez, will be representing the defendant in this case, Pope Farms. Plaintiff touched on the fertilizer ordinance of Summer Creek County. And this fertilizer is a bit of a confusing one, made so in order to protect the waterways from any damages caused by fertilizer runoff. What this ordinance states is that it is in fact completely legal to apply fertilizer during the summer months of Florida, so long as there are protective measures in place. The evidence will show that the Pope Farms in fact had a retaining wall, one which kept any fertilizer runoff that would have occurred within the farm itself, not allowing it to spill into the Summer Creek County. You will hear how this wall was suitable to do its job, not only from the owners, Ms. Pope, and her employee, Mr. Dakota Bryant, but also from the expert witness, Dr. Skylar Foley. Of course, plaintiff will have their own expert, Dr. Harley McKenna, who will likely attempt to opine that this wall was not met to the standards of the WRF. But Harley McKenna only reviewed one photograph of the wall and reviewed it for one day, while Dr. Foley had multiple photographs to go off. And Bobby Pope and Dakota Bryant, who had experience with the wall, will both testify that this wall was suitable in their eyes to do its job. In this case, the burden of proof lies solely on the plaintiff. Defense has no onus to show the greater weight of the evidence. You will have to evaluate the plaintiff's claims, these being negligence and negligence per se. Negligence they define as the violation of the ordinance, which they will have to show not only occurred, but that it led to negligence per se, which would be the incurring of damages onto the Collingwood Preserve as a result of any fertilizer runoff. You will hear from the expert witness, Dr. Foley, who, being an expert in mineralogy and the study of how chemicals are retained in soil, will express her opinion that not only were any algal blooms caused naturally, but that in fact, those same fertilizer chemicals were not at all found anywhere else in the river, and that they were found only in low amounts at the Pope Farms. Plaintiff will also allege that the algal blooms killed off the animals at the preserve. Mind you, this is a wildlife preserve. The Collingwoods don't own these animals. They are simply existing on the same place. And you will hear on cross from Mr. Reagan, an employee of Ellis Collymore, and from Miss Collymore herself, that the preserve was filthy, littered with plastic, that dissolved into the water, and you can see its results on the chemical results of both Dr. Foley and Miss McKenna. We submit to you that it is simpler that these animals choked on these undissolved plastics and died as a result of the Collymore's own negligence. We understand that in cases such as this, there is an appeal to emotion. There is an emotional irration which drives every person in a time of desperate need. But we as the defense ask you, the jury, not to rely on your emotion when determining this case. We ask you instead to evaluate all the testimony you're given, weigh it with the evidence, and use the greater weight of evidence to come to your conclusion. Thank you for your time. Step down. Thank you.
While the plaintiff recognizes that we may not object to our opening statements, if we would have been permitted to, we would have objected to speculation argumentative to statements regarding what our witness, Ms. McKenna, would be stating, as well as a statement plaintiff will allege that the algae killed off these animals.
While I recognize that there are not objections allowed, I would respond by saying that the algae itself, no one thinks that the algae itself would be killing animals. It would hypothetically be toxins produced by the algae.
Thank you. All right. Plaintiff, you may call your first witness.
The plaintiff calls Ellis Collymore to the stand. May it please the court? Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Ellis Collymore. I'm in the Collymore Wildlife Preserve in Summer Creek.
How long have you owned this preserve in Summer Creek?
It's actually been in my family for 3 generations.
And what is this wildlife preserve?
It's my business. We watch over the animals that live on our land as well as protect the marshlands. We also give riverboat tours, or at least we used to, until the algae made it impossible to get visitors.
Do you know the folks?
Yes, I do.
What is the relationship like with the folks?
Not great at the moment, unfortunately. Our families used to get along very well around 15 years ago, so I'm quite upset about this.
Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, around 15 years ago, the folks started using this inorganic fertilizer on their land called morganite.
Objection? Speculation? This isn't speculating as to anything that could have happened. This is a stated fact that this witness believes that morganite was used on this land.
Your Honor, if I may. Co-counsel, I just said what this witness believes, not what this witness knows. This witness would have no personal knowledge of the dealings and what goes on Folk Farms, and therefore her statement would be speculation.
I'm only asking this witness to testify what she knows to her own knowledge and what she believes. I'm not asking her to come to any conclusions about Folk Farms business tactics.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Would you like me to restate the question?
Yes, please.
Can you please elaborate on your relationship with the folks?
Yes, around 15 years ago, when the folks started using morganite on their land, we got major algae blooms in our marshlands. It's the same issue happening now, but that's the issue that drove us apart.
And where are you geographically compared to the folks?
We're downhill and to the west.
Your Honor, I am here what has been previously marked for identification purposes as plaintiff exhibit 1. Permission to approach the opposing counsel?
You may.
Please let the record reflect that I am now showing the opposing counsel what has been previously marked for identification purposes as plaintiff exhibit 1. Permission to approach the witness?
You may.
Please let the record reflect that I am now handing the witness what has been previously marked for identification purposes as plaintiff exhibit 1. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
How do you recognize this document?
I've seen it before.
What is this document?
It's a map of Folk Farms in the Collymore Preserve.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of the document?
Yes, it is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way since you last seen it?
No, it is not.
And is this an original or is it a copy?
It's a copy.
I now ask that what has been previously marked for identification purposes as plaintiff exhibit 1 be moved into evidence and ask the court to so admit it.
Objection or be admitted.
I now ask that the witness would step down to help publish to the jury answer a series of questions about this document.
You may.
And I have no objection to opposing counsel repositioning to be able to see this demonstration.
Your Honor, is it okay if she moves a little bit farther away from the jury box?
If you could step back, and I'm not sure how much they could see it. And if you'd like to move, you may.
I would actually like it closer.
I'm sorry, yes.
Alright, can everyone see? Alright, can you please explain what is going on in this map?
Yes, it's not like the Cullimore Preserve done business around here, as well as Polk Farms up in this area.
And I know this is a two-dimensional map, but can you point out where Moore Hill is on this map?
It's located right where Polk Farms is.
So are you uphill or downhill from Polk Farms?
We're downhill and downstream,
And can you point out where Murphy's Bend is on this map?
right between our two properties.
Now, can you please point out where most of the algae occurs on your wildlife preserve?
The west side in this area,
And where does your wildlife preserve connect to Polk Farms?
by the west side.
You can return to the stand. Now, while Polk Farms was in business, did you have the issue with algae on your preserve?
Yes, we did. That's when it first started.
And when Polk Farms had moved away,
Objection on Your Honor, relevance as to more prejudicial than probative.
Your Honor, this has relevance to the case as we are quite literally talking about the charges of the effects of this fertilizer and the Milorganite and or the algae that has occurred. So asking her about when or where this algae occurred is going to be relevant to the charges.
Your Honor, if I may. My contention is with the statements about Polk Farms being in business and that is why the algae blooms occurred. This would be more prejudicial than probative as it is correlation does not equal causation. So Polk Farms being in business does not equate to algae blooms occurring.
If I may. We did not come to any conclusions as to if Polk Farms being moved away had caused the lack of algae or appearance of algae, but rather just the fact that when Polk Farms was away, that there was algae. I believe that that is relevant to the charges at hand. Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
So while Polk Farms was moved away, did you have the issue with algae?
No, the marshlands recovered and became completely clean.
And when they moved back in, did you have the issue with algae?
Yes, it started up again.
Now, do you use fertilizer?
We do, but we only use manure, so natural fertilizer from the animals on our land.
Do you use Milorganite?
Absolutely not. After what happened 15 years ago when the bulls used it, I would never want to risk that.
What is Milorganite?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation as to the statements of after Polk Farms used it.
I believe we previously stated that this witness is able to testify to her own beliefs of the usage of Milorganite on Polk Farms property.
Yes, this witness does not have personal knowledge of whether or not this was used on the property. So they are opining on something that they would not be able to prove or have personal knowledge of.
Again, you previously established that this witness is able to testify to her own beliefs and knowledge of the usage of Milorganite. Can you please state your question or your answer?
Could you please repeat the question?
Yes. What do you use fertilizer?
Yes, we do. Natural manure from the animals on our land.
And do you use Milorganite?
No, we do not because of when Polk Farms used it 15 years ago and the algae bloom started. We would never want to risk that again.
What is Milorganite?
Milorganite is a type of inorganic fertilizer. It contains phosphorus, nitrogen, and even a little bit of mercury in it, meaning it can be very damaging to any soil quality or water quality.
Objection, Your Honor, opinion?
This witness was talking about scientific facts of how Milorganite can affect water quality, which she would know as a someone who works with nature in Summer Creek. No opinions were stated.
Your Honor, if I may. There are already experts stipulated that are arguing on this very issue of the soil and the water and how they interact in terms of the amount of organite. This witness does not have the proper qualifications to opine on this area.
I don't believe that it was ever in contention of if Milorganite is bad for the environment or not. I believe everyone agrees that Milorganite is not great for the environment, so this is not in question and would not be an issue. Can you please state your answer?
Yes, I was saying that phosphorus, nitrogen, and even a little bit of mercury can be found in Milorganite, meaning it's very damaging to any water quality or soil quality. That's the reason we do not use it.
Now, is there trash on your preserve?
Yes, a little bit blew in from Hurricane and that. Occasionally people that visit our preserve will drop some, but that's why I put my employee Reagan in charge of picking it up.
Speaking of Reagan, did you recently hire anyone?
Yes, Reagan Polk is a new hire.
And how do you view Reagan as a worker?
Well, the Polk's name may generally not see eye to eye. Reagan's actually a very good employee.
Why do you view Reagan in this way?
When I ask him to complete a task, he does it, as well as managing to get a photo of the Milorganite supply on Polk Farms.
What was this fertilizer that was found on Polk Farms?
Milorganite.
And moving on, how has the usage of fertilizer by Polk Farms affected your business?
It's been creating algae blooms in the marshlands, which have been killing animal life.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
I believe we've talked about this multiple times, the fact that this witness is able to testify to her own beliefs and knowledge of the usage of Morganite on Polk Farms, and it's been allowed previously.
Your Honor, if I may. That was statements allowed for what the situation that occurred 15 years ago. What this witness has just testified to is the what's occurring in the present day, and that they would have no personal knowledge of if Polk Farms fertilizer is the reason as to why the algae blooms occurred on her preserve.
Your Honor, I did not ask her to make conclusions about what Polk Farms is doing specifically. I asked her how the usage of fertilizer has affected her preserve.
Alright, let's sustain the objection as it relates to her opinion as to what's happening present day based on the question.
Commissioner, rephrase my question.
Mhm.
Now, recent developments, how have these recent developments changed your preserve?
The algae blooms have been killing animal life. I've devoted my life to protecting these animals and the marshlands, and on top of that, it's also destroying business.
And how has this death of animal life affected your business?
Nobody wants to tour or even support a wildlife preserve with dead animals showing up on the trails. With this, we've had to be shut down for several months, and if it continues, we're going to have to shut down altogether.
Can you estimate a monetary value to show how much you have lost?
Yes, having been shut down for months, I can safely say we've lost at least $1 million.
Do you depend on this job for your livelihood?
I do. Not only is this business my only source of income, it's also been my entire life.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Defense?
Good evening, Ms. Collymore. So to begin, part of the lawsuit you are bringing against Polk Farms is for damages done to the property owned by Collymore Preserve, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And part of this lawsuit is damages done to the wildlife on the preserve, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you have mentioned several times that these animals live on your preserve, is that right?
Yes, they do.
They live on your preserve, but Collymore Wildlife does not own these animals, do they?
No, we don't. That's the purpose of our preserve, protecting the animals and keeping them safe.
I see. And so moving on to that situation 15 years ago that you speak so heavily on, during that time, didn't your father witness algae blooms occurring up and downstream from Polk Farms, is that correct?
Yes.
And this is used to indicate that these algae blooms were caused by Polk Farms, is that right?
Yes.
But during this present situation, have you ever seen algae blooms occurring up and downstream from Polk Farms?
No, I haven't, as it's been months and I would have watched into the marshlands.
I understand. So moving on to your subsequent working relationship with Reagan Polk. Didn't Reagan Polk admit to you that she had used non-organic fertilizer on their property?
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, this is a statement of party opponent.
This is Reagan Polk, I believe.
Yes.
So-
And brought it.
Only, party opponent would only apply to Ellis Collymore and Bobby Polk, as they're the ones acting.
Your Honor, if I may? This case is not Bobby Polk versus Alice Collymore, it is Polk Farms versus Collymore Wildlife Preserve. And as the rule states, if you are an agent or an employee of either Polk Farms or Collymore Preserve, you can qualify as party opponent.
Yet, I believe it would be more efficient to only use Ellis and Bobby, as they are the main proprietors of both of these businesses. And if we are allowing hearsay evidence from people that work at either of those, then we're allowing hearsay evidence from every single person that is going to testify today, and that would not be fair.
Your Honor, if I may? What the co-counsel believes is effective is not relevant as to the rule of this case. Once again, it just states that if you are an agent or an employee of the businesses that are at issue in this case, and it is not every hearsay statement, it is just in the course of their employment on either the Polk Farms or the Collymore Preserve, it may be brought against them. So, may I ask again, did Reagan admit to you that she had used malorganite on your property?
She did, unfortunately, several months ago. But as I was saying now, it was several months ago, and I banned the usage from that ever again. I told Reagan never to use it, and I know she understands how much I hate it.
And was malorganite fertilizer used on the west end of your property?
It was, but like I said, it was several months ago, so it shouldn't have had any effect in the present situation.
And don't you plant your crops on the west end of the property, is that correct, Ms. Collymore?
Yes, we do.
And aren't the algae blooms most heavily concentrated on the west end of the property, Ms. Collymore?
Yes, but as I've said before, it's also where Polk Farms connects to the Collymore Preserve.
And you hate Mallory Grant, right, Ms. Collingwood?
Of course I do.
So is it safe to assume that after hearing this information, you fired Reagan Polk? Is that correct?
No, I did not. I was able to give instructions to him when I know he saw how angry I was.
Did you sue Reagan Polk?
No, I did not.
Thank you. So moving on to your to Reagan's half sister Bobby Polk. Have you ever witnessed Bobby Polk purchasing any kind of inorganic fertilizer?
No, I have not.
In fact, the only time when you saw Bobby purchasing fertilizer, it was organic fertilizer, was it not?
Yes.
And going back to that situation 15 years ago, when Mallory may or may not have been used on the farms, did you know that Bobby Polk was away at college during this incident?
Yes.
And that it was Reagan Polk was left in charge of the farm?
Yes. However, Polk Farms as a whole did use it, even if it wasn't Bobby specifically at that time.
And final question, Ms. Conmore. The only person in this entire case who has ever admitted to you to using Mallory fertilizer is your own employee, Reagan Polk. Is that correct?
Yes. However, as I previously stated, Reagan Polk said he would never use it again.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
No regret, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Francis, you may call your next
We
witness.
now call Reagan Polk to the stand.
Very good.
Good afternoon, Reagan.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Reagan Polk and I am 27 years old.
And could you please state your occupation?
Yes, I currently work for the Collingwood Preserve.
Were you employed anywhere before the preserve?
Yes, I used to work at Polk Farms before this.
And why don't you work for Polk Farms anymore?
Well, I quit. I just wasn't getting paid enough, so I had to leave. But Bobby tells people the story about how she fired me.
Who ran the farm before your brother Bobby did?
Before Bobby did, our father, Papa, he ran the farm. He was always teaching Bobby how to run the farm too before he left.
And when did Bobby leave?
Bobby left in early 2009 to go off to college.
And when did Bobby return?
Bobby returned in late 2009 as Papa died of a heart attack. That's also when Bobby came to ownership of the farm.
I'm sorry for your loss. What was Bobby's first order of business as the new owner of Polk Farms?
Bobby's first order of business was for us to go to Kentucky.
And why did you move to Kentucky?
Well, the economy was in a rut and things were a lot cheaper up there.
Objection, relevance, demand explain.
You may.
As this event is taken in Summer Creek County, the events that take place in Kentucky are not relevant to this case.
Your Honor, I'm just simply asking how the farm was up in Kentucky to establish how his work ethic affected the farm up in Kentucky compared to how the farm was in Polk Farms in Summer Creek.
Ooh.
So how was the farm up in Kentucky?
Well, we didn't have a lot of farm hands, so Bobby had to start teaching me how to run the farm.
And what were you taught about farming?
I was taught how to spread organic fertilizer.
After you quit at Polk Farms, how was the farm holding up?
The farm had run out of natural fertilizers, they had no animals, and they were running out of organic fertilizer that they had stashed from Kentucky.
So how were they able to keep up with the farm if they weren't able to use the natural fertilizer?
They had to switch to store-bought organic fertilizer. I saw a few buckets outside of
Speculation.
Your Honor, this witness is going to, if he finished the question, he would go on to explain that he saw these Mulliganite buckets on the Polk Farm property. That's what I was trying to get at.
Your Honor.
Yes.
The witness clearly said that Polk Farm used Malorganite and switched over to Malorganite. This is clearly speculation.
It's the same.
Did you ever see Mulliganite at Polk Farms?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I have here what has been previously marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 7A. Permission to approach opposing counsel.
You may.
Please look the record and reflect that I am now showing opposing counsel what has been previously marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 7A. Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Please let the record reflect that I am now handing the witness what has been previously marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 7A. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
I took this photograph.
And what is it?
These are the buckets of organite that I saw outside of Polk Farms.
Has it been changed or altered in any way since you last seen it?
No, it is not.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of the document since you last seen it?
Yes, it is.
And is this an original or is it a copy?
This is the copy.
Your Honor, I offer what has been previously marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 7A into evidence and ask the court to so admit it.
All right. Is it?
No objection.
I was shocked. Bobby had told us never to use this kind of stuff.
Objection, your turn.
Your Honor, this, I could rephrase my question.
Consider the question withdrawn.
What do you know about these buckets?
I've been told that these are very bad for the environment.
Do you know why?
Yes, they have chemicals in them that harm waterways.
No further questions.
All right, thank you. Cross?
So, Mr. Regenbold, you claim that you've never used my organ?
Yes, that's true.
However, Ellis Collymore claims that you admitted to him to using an organ. Is this correct? Sorry.
Yes, that's true. Ellis claimed that.
And so, is Ellis lying?
Objection, Your Honor, opinion. Also beyond the scope, this witness would not know if someone is lying or not.
Your Honor, may I rephrase the question?
You may.
Is what Ellis saying false?
In this certain instance, yes, I disagree.
Okay. Now, moving on, you claim to be an environmentalist, correct?
Yes.
However, you work on a place where you claim to be the filthiest place you ever seen. Is this correct?
Well, yes, I do my best in cleaning it up because, like I said, I'm an environmentalist.
And in cleaning it up, do you clean it all up?
Yes, I pick up all the trash.
Actually, isn't it true that you claim that you missed a few bottles here and there?
Well, yes, I'm one person. Like I said, I do it all myself.
And so, there's nobody else working and helping you pick up all this trash in this very large river?
Well, no, there's only a few bottles out of this, so hiring an extra person would pretty much just be a waste of money.
And additionally, all this litter is left by patrons of the preserve, correct?
Well, yeah, if there wasn't, then I wouldn't have a job. I pick up the trash.
And isn't it true that there aren't trash cans in the preserve?
No, there's not.
And isn't it true that you claim that Ellis is too lazy to put up trash cans?
Well, yeah, but I pick up the trash, so like I said, there's no reason for this.
There's no reason to put trash cans on the preserve, and so you could pick them up.
No, because like I just said, I pick up the trash.
All right. Now moving on, your relationship with Bobby isn't exactly. Your relationship with Bobby is rather rocky, correct?
Well, yeah, Bobby fired me from my previous job, so yeah.
Actually, I believe you claim that you quit. Is that correct?
Yes, and like I also said, Bobby claims to have fired me.
But I'm asking you. You claim that you quit, correct?
Oh, yes, I would.
Okay, and despite quitting, Bobby still lets you live in the property, correct?
Yes, it's still partially my house, and this is Polk Farms. My last name is Reagan Polk.
I understand, but wasn't all the property given to Bobby?
Yes, but Bobby's not gonna keep her brother out.
All right. Understood. And additionally, your relationship with Ellis Collymore isn't exactly very nice either, correct?
Well, it's pretty nice, but we throw a few insults at each other.
Actually, you claim that Ellis insults you in front of other employees. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, what I just said was that we insult each other a few times.
And actually, you claim that you hate everybody in this case, correct?
Well, yeah, I wasn't too happy because, as I stated, I was subpoenaed to be here.
So you hate Ellis as well?
Well, for getting me in this case a little bit, but besides that, I have no ill will towards Ellis.
Your Honor, may I approach the opposing counsel and witness who was in the privilege marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 9?
You may.
Thank you. I now hand you Exhibit 9. Can you please identify this document?
Yes, these were the text messages between myself and Bobby Polk.
And is this document true and accurate to your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, can I please maybe enter Exhibit number 97?
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation and proper predicate. This opposing counsel has not stated how they recognize it, what it is, if it's a fair and accurate depiction of the document since he's last seen it, if it's an original or copy, etc. So I'd ask that he lays the proper foundation before asking a series of questions on this document.
Your Honor, can I respond?
You may.
These documents are already stipulated as authentic, and there's no need to ask those questions.
However, this is laying the proper predicate, which is necessary to admit that into evidence. So I'd ask that you do that.
Mrs. Lee.
is this document, copy or is it a true, is it a copy or is it a, actual, is the actual document?
This is a piece of paper, not a phone, so I'd say a copy.
And what was the date on this document?
July 25th.
And where does this document come from?
This comes from the text messages between myself and Bobby Polk.
Your Honor, may I enter exhibit 97?
No objection.
All right. Will be admitted.
So, you claim that you decided to leave the property on August 1st, is that correct?
Yes, I left the property on August 1st.
And could you please read out loud the second text message from you?
What are you talking about?
This, your second text message on the document, right?
I thought you were done with me after I moved out.
Does this mean that you moved out by the time that this document was, that you sent that message?
Well, I was in the process of moving out. I just didn't move out one night.
And can you please read the date on which these text messages were sent?
Like I said before, July 25th.
Yeah. And so, are you aware that July 25th is a full week before August 1st?
Yeah.
And would you claim in your affidavit that that's August 1st is the day that you decided to move out?
Yes, the day I decided to finish moving out, I officially went out.
Well, thank you, for.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, brief one.
Raymond, how was the condition of the Collingwood Preserve after the hurricane?
It was really bad. It was trash and there was mercury green in the water.
And do you know why it was this color?
Yes, there were algal blooms in this.
And do you know where the water at the Collingwood Preserve originates from?
Yes, it comes from Murphy's Bend right before Polk Farms.
No further questions, Your Honor. May I publish Exhibit 7A to the jury?
You may.
Your Honor, may I publish exhibit 9 to the jury?
You may. Thank you, Ms.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Ms. Harley McKenna to the stand.
All right.
May I please the court? Good evening, Ms. McKenna. Now, can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon, my name is Harley McKenna.
And what is your occupation?
Currently, I'm working as a hydrologist for the Florida Division of Water Resource Management, otherwise known as the WRM.
And what educational background have you obtained to become a hydrologist?
I've received my bachelor's degree in environmental science as well as my master's degree in environmental engineering.
Can you explain exactly what a hydrologist's job is?
Of course. Hydrology is the study of water and its movement in relation to weather and geology. As a hydrologist, it is my job to test water samples and ensure that they are meeting all codes and regulations of the WRM.
Now, Ms. McKenna, how much experience do you have in the field of hydrology?
Well, I've had over 10 years of experience working at the WRM. I've also attended several hydrology conferences, and I've even written 3 peer-reviewed articles on the subject.
Can you explain exactly what a peer-reviewed article is?
Of course. A peer-reviewed article is an article personally written by a scientist that has been sent into the scientific community for evaluation to ensure that it is accurate.
Now, what did you write these peer-reviewed articles about?
I wrote my articles on the topic of water contamination and new methods of testing.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay and relevance as to these written peer-reviewed articles.
Your Honor, this is the witness's own articles that she has written, so I would say this is not hearsay, since she has written these articles herself and she would know what these articles are about.
May I clarify, Your Honor? These are out-of-court statements being offered by plaintiff for the truth of the matter asserted, and as well as that, they are being offered seemingly for relevance in a case where we already have 2 experts that are opining on the nature of algal blooms, not necessarily water. Defense fails to see how this is relevant and believes that it is hearsay.
Your Honor, if I may, I'm simply just asking this question to establish credibility with this witness, but if the opposing counsel would like me to move on, I will gladly do so. So can you tell me what exactly these peer-reviewed articles are about?
Yes, I wrote them on the topic of water contamination and new methods of testing water.
Thank you. Now, can you tell me how exactly you became involved with this particular case?
Yes. I was contacted by the plaintiff on October 19th to inspect the plaintiff's property, which is Collingwood Preserve, as well as the property of the Defense Council, Polk Farms.
Let's talk about Collingwood Preserve. What did you discover when first coming to this pond?
Well, when I first arrived, I noticed that there was a lot of litter around the area, and there were also dead fish in the waterways.
Did you notice anything else out of the ordinary?
I noticed that there were excessive amounts of algal blooms in the waterways.
Can you explain to the jury what exactly a algal bloom is?
Yes. An algal bloom is a mass of photosynthetic organisms, and an algal bloom is just an incredibly large grouping of these organisms in a waterway.
Thank you. Now, how does a natural algal bloom occur?
Naturally, algal blooms will occur through an excess amount of water or nutrients, such as in the event of a hurricane.
Objection, Your Honor, opinion, and if I may explain. While this witness is stipulated as an expert, they are an expert within the field of hydrology. They are not a biologist, which would allow them to opine on such matters as algal growth and its origination from waterways.
Your Honor, the witness today is testifying on what she has found on Collingwood Preserve and within Polk Farms, and she is a hydrologist that works with water, and algal blooms grow within water, so I would say that she would know how algal blooms occur. Can you explain how algal blooms can naturally occur?
Yes. So, such as in the event of a hurricane, like Hurricane Annette, there's an excess amount of water and nutrients, and the hurricane will stir up these nutrients, and then the nutrients will be absorbed by the algae, causing an algal bloom.
Now, would you say that this particular algal bloom in the Collingwood Preserve was a natural occurrence?
No, it was not. In all of my years of experience, I've never seen an algal bloom of this amount occurring naturally.
Now, what other areas did you inspect?
I also inspected Polk Farms.
Your Honor, I have here what has been previously marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 4 and Plaintiff Exhibit 5. Permission to approach opposing counsel.
You may.
Please let the record reflect. I am now showing opposing counsel what has been previously marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 4 and Plaintiff Exhibit 5. Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Please let the record reflect. I am now handing the witness what has been previously marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 4 and Plaintiff Exhibit 5. Do you recognize these documents?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
I took these photographs.
And what are these photographs?
Exhibit 4 is a photograph I have taken prior to this experiment of a separate container wall, and Exhibit 5 is an image I've taken of the container wall at Polk Farms.
Are these a fair and accurate depiction since you've last seen these documents?
Yes, ma'am.
Have they been changed or altered in any way?
Yeah, there's no.
Are these originals or are they copies?
These are both copies.
Your Honor, I now offer Plaintiff Exhibit 4 and Plaintiff Exhibit 5 into evidence and ask the court to so admit.
Actually, Your Honor, objects to hearsay specifically for exhibit number 4, the photograph taken of a different containing wall before this case.
Your Honor, this piece of evidence is simply a photograph of a container wall that is within the WRM's requirements and regulations, and she compared these two photographs to determine her investigation and whether or not the container wall at Polk Farms was functional or dysfunctional.
May I respond, Your Honor? Defense finds that this evidence admission would be more prejudicial and probative, as it is a wall taken of a separate investigation that is not the Polk Farms wall. That doesn't serve any purpose in this case, except as be asserted for the truth of the matter and be an out-of-court statement.
I ask that the witness be able to step down and publish to the jury, as well as answer a series of questions.
Yes, you may. And counsel for the defense, you may do a close.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, first referring to Exhibit 1 that has been previously entered into evidence, can you point to where exactly Polk Farms is located?
Of course. Polk Farms is located here, which is northeast of Collingwood Preserve, located here.
And where's Murphy's Bend?
Murphy's Bend is the midpoint between these two areas, which is located right here.
Now, Ms. McKenna, did you test in this area?
I did not test Murphy's Bend, no.
And why did you not think it was necessary to test in this area?
Well, I'd already collected samples from Hope Farms and Collymore Preserve, so I had all the evidence I needed to conclude in my investigation.
Thank you. Now moving on to exhibits 4 and 5, if you can show the jury. Now, can you explain how these two photos differentiate?
Of course. Exhibit 4 is an image I took prior to this investigation of a separate container wall. This image depicts a container wall that meets all the rules and regulations of the WRM. As you can see, there are no holes or cracks along its foundation, meaning that any water runoff from this soil here would not enter this waterway here. Exhibit 5, on the other hand, is an image taken from Hope Farms of their container wall. As you can see, there are several holes and cracks along its foundation, meaning that it does not meet the codes of the WRM, and that any runoff, such as fertilizer runoff coming from this soil here, could possibly enter this waterway here, which is the Center Creek River.
Now, Ms. McKenna, what did you determine after inspecting this wall container?
Well, I determined that this wall is dysfunctional as, relating to the codes of the WRM.
Thank you. You may return to the stand. Now, Ms. McKenna, did you take water samples of the two areas that you inspected?
Yes, I did.
Now, what did you find within the areas of the Collymore Preserve?
In the Collymore Preserve, I noticed that there were lower levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and mercury, which are all ingredients in the Lord-Night fertilizer. However, there were higher levels of brevetoxins, which are toxic chemicals released by algal blooms that are occasionally lethal to animals, such as in the event of red tide.
Now, what did you find within the Summer Creek marshlands water samples?
Up by Hope Farms, I noticed that there were higher levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and mercury. However, there were lower levels of brevetoxins.
Can you explain why there could have been a lower level of brevetoxins in this area?
Well, in this area, there were no algal blooms at Hope Farms. So, since the brevetoxins are released by algal blooms, it's likely due to the fact that the algal blooms were non-existent.
Now, Ms. McKenna, in your expert opinion, do you think that the traces of Lord-Night fertilizer found in the Collymore Preserve was a direct result from Hope Farms?
Yes, it did.
And why is that?
Well, with Hurricane Annette leading to an excessive amount of water on Hope Farms property, this would have washed their fertilizer into the waterway because their wall was dysfunctional. Their container wall had several holes and cracks along its foundation. So once these chemicals entered the Center Creek River, they would have traveled downstream due to gravity, then entered the Collymore Preserve. Once the fertilizer arrived here, it would have fertilized the algal blooms, and then those algal blooms would have grown, causing brevetoxins to occur.
Now, Ms. McKenna, when did you exactly conduct your investigation?
I conducted my investigation on October 19th.
And how long ago, or how far away was this from the Hurricane Annette?
This is roughly 10 weeks after Hurricane Annette occurred.
Now, in your expert opinion, do you think you found any fallacies within your investigation, even after conducting your experiment 10 weeks after Hurricane Annette?
No. In fact, because I conducted my investigation 10 weeks after the hurricane had fallen, this would have allowed the algal blooms to absorb those nutrients and then grow.
Now, Ms. McKenna, isn't it true that Dr. Foley was your teacher?
Yes, that is correct. Dr. Foley was my professor.
Now, do you agree with Dr. Foley?
I do not agree with Dr. Foley's conclusion in this case. No.
How come you don't agree with Dr. Foley?
Dr. Foley believes that the algal blooms...
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. And if I may, flash on.
Your Honor, the witness has reviewed Dr. Foley's work. They both have reviewed each other's work, so she would know what Dr. Foley has investigated and her conclusions. Therefore, she would know the conclusions of Dr. Foley's work, and she can testify on whether she agrees with them or not.
Your Honor, this witness just stated that she said Dr. Foley believes. She is attempting to speculate on what Dr. Foley would believe in any case. If she wishes to report upon the report of Dr. Foley itself, she may do so. But attempting to, speculate on the mental state of a party opponent, I believe, constitutes speculation.
Sustained.
Your Honor, can I ask follow-up questions?
Yes.
So, in
were naturally occurring. However, I disagree with this.
And why do you disagree with this?
Well, like I said, I've been working in this area for over 10 years, and I've never seen algal blooms of this extent naturally occurring just from a hurricane. There had to be a different source, which in this case was Polk Farms.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, excellent. Cross. Yes, Your Honor. May I ask permission to move the lectern as to face the jury more so?
You may.
Excellent, thank you. All right, can you hear me fine, jury?
Yes.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Ms. McKenna. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, thank you. How are you?
Excellent. I'm very good. I just wanted to talk to you and clarify a few points that you mentioned just now in your testimony. You opined heavily on the brevetoxins and the algal blooms and the causes, these being caused by chemicals in the water. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your qualifications are hydrology.
Yes.
Do you have any qualifications in biology?
Objection, relevance.
Your Honor, Dr. Foley's scope of expertise is highly relevant to this case, and while she may be an expert within hydrology specifically, her opining and me asking if she has a biology degree is completely relevant, as it essentially allows for a holistic view of her conclusions.
This witness has already explained her credentials today, so she has not stated that she was in biology, so I think this question is irrelevant.
Your Honor, this is cross-examination. While they may have asked on direct, I am now asking on cross. Thank you. And Dr. Foley, do you have any degrees in biology?
No, I do not.
Do you have any degrees in toxicology?
No, I do not.
And describe, on the subject of your investigation, you stated earlier that you did not test Murphy's bend.
That is correct.
Does the jury have Exhibit 1 on hand? If not, I can get it from you. Excellent. Yes, please. Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Or what has been moved to evidence as? Here you go. I'm now handing you what has been marked as Evidence 1. Dr. Foley, could you please show this to the jury from your position? Really? Could you outline where the Murphy's Bend is located just by drawing a little bit right there?
Of course. Like I said, Murphy's Bend is located here, which is the midpoint.
And Murphy's Bend is a bend, in fact, is it not?
It is.
And it's a bend in the Summer Creek River.
Yes.
And you could say it's a sort of junction point between the Polk Farms and the Columbia Preserve. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you did not test Murphy's Bend in your investigation, did you?
No, I did not.
And in fact, Dr. Foley tested Murphy's Bend in her investigation,
Yes.
as you're aware. And Dr. Foley believed, are you aware that Dr. Foley states that your investigation is incomplete due to not having tested Murphy's Bend?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
I see. And Dr. Foley used to be your teacher, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But you've obviously learned more than just what a teacher would tell you.
Yes,
right?
in my 10 years of experience.
Yes, and one of those aspects is that you worked in multiple other water-related lawsuits prior to this, is that correct?
Yes.
3 specifically, where you, in 2017,
Objection, relevance.
Your Honor, this will be highly relevant as it will go to the bias of this expert, especially in the fact as it's essentially a predicate for bias on her being on the stand here today.
Your Honor, if I may, in this witness's line of work and her job is not relevant to what she's testifying to today. In the previous past, yes, she has testified in court before to previous cases, but that has nothing to do with her bias or opinions that she's making in court today.
May I respond, Your Honor? I believe that this witness's job is highly relevant to this case, seeing as she is an expert who is testing specifically for hydrology in the water. Her involvement in any prior cases, especially ones where she was with a plaintiff, would indicate any bias in her being on plaintiff. Thank you. And is it true that in 2017, you testified for plaintiff 3 times in a row for water-related lawsuits?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it true that following your testimony in these lawsuits, you were promoted in your position at the WRA?
Yes, I do good work.
I see. And you earlier opined, looking at Dr. David. Yes, opined earlier as to water tests that you conducted on the Polk Farms and the County Preserve. Is that correct? And did you perform any mass spectrometry results?
Yes, we did.
I see. Your Honor, may I approach this witness with those previously marked for identification purposes as exhibits 10A and 10B?
You may.
And opposing counsel as well?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Exhibits 10A and 10B. I'm now ending with the previously marked as exhibits 10A and 10B. Ms. McKenna, are these your mass spectrometry results?
Yes, they are.
I see. And are they copies of your mass spectrometry results, or are they merely, are they the actual thing?
These are the copies.
I see. And when were these taken?
Let's see, these were taken in 2019 after October 15th, 2019, when I
I see.
selected those samples.
I see. Yes, I see. Could you identify document 10A, please, or exhibit 10A? Please do not show the jury yet. It hasn't been admitted into evidence. My bad. Sorry. Could you please just identify it, say what it is?
Oh, of course. Exhibit 10A is my samples from Collingmore Preserve and Polk Farms.
I see. And what about 10B?
10B is my clean water control sample and Milorganite ingredients test.
And are these fair and accurate representations of those tests that you conducted?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, the defense would now like to move exhibits 10A and 10B into evidence.
Any objection?
Not at all.
All right, 10A and 10B will be admitted.
Excellent. And may I ask that the witness come down in front of the jury with the exhibits and demonstrate them?
Yes, you may.
And allow opposing counsel as well to come down.
Yes.
Perfect. Do you have both exhibits?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Perfect. And could you point out what exactly 10A is, was? Oh, sorry.
So 10A is my results from Polk Farms, and as you can see, so the N represents the nitrogen, Hg is mercury, P is phosphorus, and PTE is plastic particles.
Excellent. And could you indicate the top upper limit of this graph, please?
It is labeled as 40, which is volume in, yeah, just volume.
Correct. Volume in the water. And could you show both documents at the same time, please? Excellent. And what is exhibit 10A at the sorry? Yes, total, yeah, of course. What is exhibit 10B at the bottom?
10B at the bottom is Milorganite ingredients,
I see. And what is the upper limit on the Milorganite ingredients?
100.
I see. So are these levels that are tested in these graphs for the Polk Farms, for these chemicals, much lower than the chemicals in the Milorganite fertilizer?
Yes, even though the scale is different, I would say that these are still lower.
Yeah, okay, excellent. And I would also like to point out the PTE located on the Collingmore Preserve. You, being a witness, were not sequestered from hearing testimony. You heard Ellis Collingmore state that their preserve was littered with trash. Is that correct?
Yes,
I see. And in this, they included bottles, correct?
yes,
And it can be reasonably assumed that this would include plastic?
yes, plastic bottles and aluminum.
Excellent. And what is PTE exactly?
PTE is microplastics released by like the degrading of plastic bottles, aluminum cans, things like that.
Excellent. And can PTE particles kill an animal?
Not alone, they cannot.
I see. But can undissolved plastics that would be located on a nature preserve example kill animals when they attempt to eat these plastics and choke on them?
Well, with PTE, it would have to be in conjunction with something else, such as brevetoxins, for it to be lethal to animals alone.
I appreciate your clarifying the point to the jury, but I'm asking, can undissolved plastics kill animals?
Like I said, not alone.
I mean undissolved plastics as in animals choking to death. Can they be killed by that on their own?
Yes.
I see. Perfect. And you two may return back to the stand. Thank you for your time. No, you just leave it. Yeah, still leave it. And I won't take up much more of your time, Dr. Ms. McKenna, but do you believe your scientific conclusions to be accurate and valid in this case?
Yes, completely.
With 100% certainty?
Yes, completely.
Would any piece of evidence new change your mind?
No, it would not.
No new evidence would change your mind.
No, I conducted all the investigation that I needed to do, and I have all the evidence that I need to make a valid conclusion in this investigation.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. No further questions at this time.
All right, thank you. You agree, right?
Yes, Your Honor, brief one.
Okay.
PTE levels found in your investigation would be lethal to animals?
Not alone, they cannot be lethal to animals. It merely causes digestive issues in animals.
And how is this possible?
Well, when an animal intakes PTE, it messes with their digestive system. However, these problems are somewhat minor and it cannot kill them alone.
What can kill these animals?
Well, bromotoxins can kill animals alone, and bromotoxins in conjunction with PTE can kill animals.
Did you find bromotoxins within the water samples that you have tested?
Yes, it did.
And lastly, Ms. McKenna, how confident are you with your investigation that you have made?
I'm incredibly confident in my investigation. Like I said, I've worked in this field for over 10 years, and I'm the supervisor of this area, the Summer Creek Marshlands.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, thank you. You may sit down. All right, any additional witnesses on the contest?
No, Your Honor, at this time I think it rests.
All right. Counsel may call your first witness.
Excellent. The defense calls the witness, Dr. Skylar Foley, to the stand.
Very good.
Good afternoon. Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Thank you. My name is Dr. Skylar Foley, spelled Foley.
And Dr. Foley, what do you do for a living?
I work at the University of Florida as a professor, where I teach graduate and doctoral courses in hydrology and meteorology.
Very well. What qualifications do you have for teaching these courses?
I've written 50 scientifically published articles as shown by research known as scientific facts, as the other opposing counsel mentioned. Along with that, I've written 4 textbooks to teach at Florida universities and have conducted and have, yes.
And what degrees do you hold?
I received my bachelor's degree in ecology and my master's degree in hydrology from Florida State University and my PhD in limnology from the study of inland waters from Florida Central University.
Very well. And Dr. Foley, how did you become involved in this case?
I became involved when in December of 2020 I was contacted by the defense counsel to review the work of my former student, Ms. Harley McKenna's report into this case.
Ah, and what did you review in Ms. McKenna's report?
I reviewed her investigation and finally concluded into what caused the algal blooms and animal death on the Palmer Preserve, along with her mass spectrometry results.
Very well. And did you test any of the locations yourself?
Yes, I tested both the water and soil samples at Polk Farm and Murphy's Bend.
And what did the water samples from Polk Farms show?
The water samples from Polk Farm showed low levels of phosphorus, nitrogen, and mercury.
Now, you stated that you were contacted by the defense much later after the hurricane occurred. Approximately how long after were you contacted?
About a year.
Wouldn't that affect the reliability of your results?
Well, I would normally say water results are not the most reliable. In this case, it would be reliable as I took soil samples as well. And soil preserves pollutants for long periods of time by being able to soak up the chemicals found in the water.
And on that note, what did the soil samples from Polk Farms show?
The soil samples supported the water results by showing low levels of phosphorus and nitrogen.
Very well. And, Your Honor, may I approach this witness with what has been previously moved into evidence as Exhibits 10A and 10B?
You may.
Excellent. And may I obtain those copies from the jury?
You may.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry. I am now handing you what has been moved into evidence as Exhibits 10A and 10B. Could you show these to the jury from your position, and specifically show 10A?
This is 10A.
I see. And could you indicate levels of nitrogen and phosphorus found at Polk Farms?
Levels of nitrogen and phosphorus were moderately low at Polk Farms.
And could you indicate which bumps those are using your, using a finger essentially?
Yes, that would be this N and this B.
Excellent. And these seemingly high levels of nitrogen, these seemingly moderate levels of nitrogen and phosphorus, where did you determine they came from?
I determined they occurred naturally, as phosphorus and nitrogen naturally occur in Florida's very rich soil, especially when there were heavy rainfall and heavy winds due to Hurricane Annette, where the soil could have mixed into the water and naturally deposited these chemicals.
Very well.
And what about the presence of mercury? I don't think that's very natural.
Yes, while it is not as common in nature, it is nothing overly concerning. As shown here, the levels of mercury at Hope Farms were much lower than the levels of mercury in Milorganite, and the levels of mercury at Collimer Preserve were even lower than the levels in the control sample.
Collimer Preserve. And you stated earlier that you also tested Murphy's Bend. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Very well. And what did the tests for Murphy's Bend show?
The test for Murphy's Bend tested for similarly low levels of phosphorus, nitrogen, and mercury.
And was that both soil and water?
Both soil and water, yes.
Very well. And you were non-sequestered as an expert. Were you able to hear the testimony of Ms. McKenna?
Yes, I was.
And did you hear her when she said that she did not test Murphy's Bend?
Yes, I did.
And do you think that Ms. McKenna should have tested Murphy's Bend?
Absolutely. Murphy's Bend is a key factor in this case, as it shows how two very important places, Hope Farms and Collimer Preserve, interacted. Not testing this location was a major flaw in Ms. McKenna's investigation, and as such, a major flaw in her conclusion.
Very well. And on the subject of your other testings, did you happen to test the Collimer Preserve?
While I tried to, I was not welcomed into it, as when I tried to go in, Ellis Collymore looked me in the eyes through the glass window and switched the open sign to closed, so I got the feeling I was not welcome.
Very well. Did you do anything following this?
I decided to use Miss Carly McKenna's results for Collimer Preserve.
Excellent. And based on the forensic evidence that's indicating low levels of nitrogen and phosphorus throughout the Summer Creek of Polk Farms, what did you conclude?
Yes, due to the almost non-existent levels of phosphorus and nitrogen at Murphy's Bend, I concluded that no fertilizer runoff was coming from Polk Farms, causing the algae blooms.
And you also saw the demonstration earlier of high levels of PTE. Where could this PTE have come from?
PTE can only come from prolonged periods of plastic dissolving in water, as you've been told. And you've also been told, Collymore has been described as one of the filthiest places Reading Polk has ever seen.
Objection, speculation.
May you, Honor, we ask that plaintiff clarifies their objection.
Your Honor, this witness is testifying that this is the filthiest place that they have seen. I feel like that is a speculation.
Your Honor, I would agree in this case. However, Dr. Foley, being an expert, was not sequestered and was able to hear the testimony of Reagan Polk. And he admitted that Collymore was the filthiest place he had seen on earth in this courtroom today. Thank you. And you were able to listen to that.
Yes, it was, which is why I concluded that it most likely originated from the preserve itself.
And are undissolved plastics, if consumed by animals, known to kill them?
Yes, it's unfortunate, but very commonly happen, especially in Florida.
Very well. And could you point out the graphs at the Polk Farms and the Collymore Preserve just one more time to the jury? Excellent. And could you actually come down to the jury, make sure the mind your distance, you see? And you may also come, attorney, to the it's okay, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Excellent. And Dr. Foley, could you state where the levels of brevetoxins are on these graphs?
These are not shown on these graphs. They're only mentioned in Ms. Carly McKenna's report.
Very well. You may go back to the stand. Thank you. Dr. Foley, you also heard Ms. McKenna say here today that she would not change her mind even if new evidence was introduced into this case. Is that how a scientist should act?
Not a very good one, as if you get new evidence, you should consider it as a new factor in your case.
Very well. And Dr. Foley, were you paid to be here today?
Yes, I was.
And do you believe people deserve money for when they work hard?
Yes, I do.
I see. And could you briefly summarize to the jury what you found in your investigation?
My final conclusion is that the algae blooms occurred naturally after a heavy storm like Hurricane Annette stirred up the sustaining nutrients that naturally occur in Florida soil with its heavy winds and rains, causing this unfortunate but natural incident to happen.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Foley. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
I now come to this witness for a cross.
Thank you. Any cross?
Yes, Your Honor, may it please the court?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Foley.
Yes, it is.
Now, you were asked to test the water samples in the Collimer Preserve and Polk Farms, correct?
Yes.
However, you did not.
I was not specifically requested to test anything. I was Murphy's Bend and Hope Farms to be clear.
However, the algal growth is in the Collingwood Preserve, correct?
Yes, but I have Ms. Carla McNair results, who you also relied on in your investigation.
So you think that the area with the excessive amount of algae was not necessary to test in your investigation?
I felt it was unnecessary.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation, and if I may explain. This attorney asked if Dr. Foley felt it was unnecessary. Dr. Foley just testified that they were unable to enter the Collingwood Preserve to test the results, and furthermore that they utilized the samples of Harlan McKenna.
Your Honor, this witness was asked to do an investigation, and the Collingwood Preserve is what is in question today, and she is claiming that she did not feel it was necessary to test this location. And I'm asking why she didn't feel that way.
Objection is overruled. If you could remind us of the question.
Yes. So you didn't think it was necessary to test the Collingwood Preserve, correct?
No, I did not, because I had the same exact results that Ms. Harlan McKenna relied on for your investigation.
So you relied on Harlan McKenna's results, correct?
No, I relied on her water samples for the Collingwood Preserve.
So you're saying that you relied on her testing and what she had found, correct?
I relied on her water samples taken from Collingwood Preserve, yes.
Okay. However, you disagree with Ms. McKenna,
I
correct?
do. As I tested additional locations like Murphy's Bend, which supported my point as there was no fertilizer runoff through there. No chemicals found anyway.
Now, let's talk about Murphy's Bend. You tested it and found low levels of mercury, phosphorus, and nitrogen, correct?
Yes,
And these are chemicals found in malordinite fertilizer, correct?
yes,
And you even stated that mercury was not even that naturally occurring, correct?
yes, but these are extremely low levels, especially when compared to the malordinite samples.
However, these are still levels found in Murphy's Bend, right?
Of course, the loss of chemicals are naturally occurring, and they're already stated.
Okay. Now, aren't you aware that Hope Farms is on top of the hill and Collingwood Preserve on the bottom of the hill, right?
Yes, and where?
And Murphy's Bend is the exact pinpoint between the two. So any runoff coming from Hope Farms would trickle down into Collingwood Preserve, correct?
Through Murphy's Bend, as it is a midway point? Yes.
So this is why high chemicals are not found on top of the hill rather than the Collingwood Preserve, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, ambiguous. I would ask that counsel rephrase their sentence to make it clear not only for the witness but for the jury.
I can do that.
All right, question, Your Honor.
So knowing that the Hope Farms is on top of the hill and Collingwood Preserve is on the bottom of the hill, wouldn't it be easily referable that the runoff from Hope Farms would go down due to gravity into the Collingwood Preserve as runoff?
Well, I do not believe this is mentioned anywhere in my affidavit. I can't extrapolate if you would like me to assume what would happen.
In your expert opinion, within your work of hydrology, limnology, meteorology, would you know that you would know how water flow works, especially as a expert hydrologist, correct?
Yes, but I also am an expert witness, which means I'm bound to what I said in my affidavit. So unless you'd like me to extrapolate, I don't know what you want.
Sure, you can extrapolate.
Oh, okay then. I believe that no, that is not why there are high levels found of Hope Farms and low levels of Murphy at Collingwood Preserve. Science is a very complicated thing, especially in nature, after a hurricane just occurred.
So you don't think water flow going down would take these chemicals from Hope Farms and trickle it down to the Collingwood Preserve?
Oh, I'm sure at some point, yes, but that statement like that, especially in a case where that is a very key factor, that's a bit presumptuous.
Now, moving on, let's talk about the container wall on Hope Farms.
Okay.
So, did you look at this picture of the container wall?
I actually looked at multiple photographs provided to me by Bobby Polk, yes.
And so you only looked at photographs, correct?
Yes, looked at
You did not
photographs.
personally look at the container wall in person and inspected it at the moment?
As I just said, yes, I did it, as it was already rebuilt by the time I was contacted.
So you came to the conclusion that this container wall was functional.
I did. I believe I was still a little run down, that it was still functional, as most of the things were superficial.
So you would say that this container wall with multiple holes and cracks in it is functional?
Multiple holes and cracks above the water line.
However, you cannot see within this picture under the water line, so you do not know if there are cracks and holes under the water line, do you?
Well, not specifically. I cannot believe Father McKenna mentioned anything about looking at those either, so I do not get the point here.
Miss McKenna personally went and investigated the the Polk Farm container wall, and she testified that it was dysfunctional. However, you only looked at photographs.
Yes, but that's what was given to me when I started my investigation, and I believe from what I've seen that it is functional, as every problem that it could have had was above the water line, making it sufficient enough to prevent fertilizer runoff.
Okay, well, let's talk about when you started your investigation. So you said that you were contacted a year later after the whole occurrence, correct?
Yes, a little over a year.
Wouldn't you say that over a year is a really long time for chemicals to disappear and different things to happen within that period of time?
Not particularly. As I mentioned in my direct, I also took soil samples, which collect chemicals from water and makes it linger much longer, as shown in Murphy's Bend as well, especially as lots of chemicals can be collected in a sudden bend in the river. So no, I do not believe that.
Okay. Now, lastly, Dr. Foley, you are being paid $25,000 to testify here today.
No, I'm not. I am being paid $25,000 for my analysis, my investigation, my 55 hours of research, yes.
So, this is still $25,000. Wouldn't you say that this would lead to bias in your investigation since you are being paid to do all of this work?
Not at all. I am being paid because I did my job.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Can you redirect?
We have a brief redirect, Your Honor.
Yes.
And may I? No, actually not.
Admittedly, Dr. Foley, this seemed a little bit confusing. I would like to ask you some more questions about the container wall. Did you review one photograph of the container wall?
No, I reviewed a series of photographs provided to me by Bobby Polk.
I see. And exhibit number 5, Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been previously entered into evidence as exhibit number 5?
You may.
And this exhibit, which I handed you, here you go, Harley McKenna said she reviewed it, and she took a photo of that. I understand, right? Correct? Excellent. And this is a photograph of the retaining wall of Polk Farms, is that correct?
Yes.
And when did Hurricane Annette touch down on Polk Farms?
I believe it was August 8th,
2019?
2019, yes.
Excellent. And could you read out the date that that photograph of the wall was taken while showing it to the jury?
Of course. October 15th, 2019.
So this photograph was taken after the hurricane hit Polk Farms.
Yes,
And do hurricanes tend to destroy things?
absolutely.
I see. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Let's call your next witness.
Your Honor, the next call is for the right.
Hello. Now, please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Dakota Bryant, B-R-Y-A-N.
And what are your credentials?
I worked at the local grocery store owned by my family until I was 19 years old.
And what's your history with your Collymores?
Well, after the Popes left in 2009, the Collymores started to help everyone in town financially, except for us.
And what's your relationship with the Popes?
Well, me and my family have always been close to the Popes, and I recently got a job as their new farm manager.
And how did you get a job at Polk Farms?
After they returned to Summer Creek, I got an interview.
And what does your job entail?
When I started, it mostly entailed cleaning the crop area.
Was the crop area not cleaned previously?
No, it's not.
Why so?
There was dump fertilizer on the untilled soil.
And who was working there at the time?
Reagan was working there at the time.
Now, speaking of Reagan, what's your relationship with Reagan?
Well, when we first met, it was clear that Reagan didn't like me.
Did anything happen when you were hired by Bobby?
I I heard Bobby and Reagan having an argument in Bobby's office.
And what was said in the argument?
I heard Bobby say, "You're fired," causing Reagan to leave.
And what happened after that?
Well, I didn't see much of Reagan around the farm after that.
Now moving on, were you able to get on the crops planted?
Well, despite Reagan's poor performance, we were able to get all of the crops planted in May of 2019, but this was still 2 months behind schedule.
And what fertilizer did you use during this delay?
We've always used organic fertilizer. In fact, we order it every month.
And to your knowledge, has Polk Farms ever ordered anything other than organic fertilizer?
No, we would never use anything other than organic fertilizer.
Now moving on, have you ever received any other types of fertilizer?
Yes, around mid-July, we randomly received a large shipment of ammonia.
And what was Bobby's reaction to the argument?
Well, when I first saw it, Bobby was yelling, "I didn't buy any of this." They said that a large purchase had been made on the company credit card.
And did anyone other than you or Bobby have access to the company credit card?
Yes, during a dinner party, Reagan had access to the wallet.
And did anything significant happen at the dinner?
Yes, I saw Reagan take Bobby's wallet and go to the bathroom. She was in there for a few minutes before returning it to Bobby. I found it strange.
And around this time, were any purchases made on the company credit card?
Yes, about a week later, the Milorganite shipment arrived, purchased with the company credit card.
And could you please specify what date this is on?
July 20th.
Awesome. Now moving on, did anything happen to the fertilizer after it was delivered?
Well, it was left for the rest of July, but afterwards, on August 3rd, it was missing.
And what happened to it?
I saw Reagan standing near the buckets the day before, claiming, when I asked them about it, they said that they were just picking up some of their things. However, they looked very nervous.
And to your knowledge, has Milorganite ever been used on the property while you've been manager there?
No, in the time that I've been to our manager, Milorganite has never been used on the property.
Thank you, no further questions.
Any comments?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Dakota.
Good afternoon.
Now, you work for Polk Farms, is that right?
Correct.
In fact, you're the manager at Polk Farms?
Yes.
Now, what did you say to manage a farm? You should at least have some experience in farming.
Well, I would say that if I'm getting in-job experience, then no, I didn't need any previous experience.
But it's true that you actually don't have any farming experience whatsoever prior to working at Polk Farms, do you?
No, I worked at my family's grocery store.
So you think working at a grocery store is compatible to managing a farm?
Well, my family has always been close with the folks, and I believe that with the experience I received on the job, I did have enough experience.
However, you also don't have a college degree, let alone a degree in anything regarding farming or business, do you?
No, but I don't believe you need a degree to be a good farmer.
Yet Bobby still threw you into the position as manager without any experience in you.
I wouldn't say through, but yes, I did get the job.
You own stock shares in Polk Farms, is that right?
Yes.
And your shares increase in the farm if Polk Farms is found out liable.
Well, if we lose in this case, I don't think that our family-owned business will be able to continue. But if we win, I will be able to discuss getting more.
So you will financially benefit from the outcome of this case?
Not necessarily. If we lose, though, we will go under.
Thank you. Now, there's a container wall at Polk Farms, is that right?
Correct.
But in fact, the container wall at Polk Farms isn't in the best conditions, is it?
Not currently, but at the time of this case, I did report it to Bobby.
But in fact, there are quite a few holes and cracks in this wall, correct?
I'm not sure if that is specified, but I did report it to Bobby, yes.
Now, isn't it quite literally your job as manager of the farm to keep up with the farm and surrounding area?
Well, that's not specified in my job description, so I cannot testify to that.
This wall was left broken with cracks and holes in it for months, and you did not fix this wall, did you?
I never specified that the wall was broken.
So that's
I
not-
only wanted it. Sorry, what?
Continue.
I never specified that the wall was broken. I merely wanted to get it checked out, just to make sure that we were being extremely precautious.
Thank you for that. But did you fix this wall?
I did not fix this wall, no, as I am not a contractor.
Okay. And this wall is meant to prevent fertilizer and harmful chemicals from entering the healthy waterway.
Yes, that is the purpose of the container wall.
Yet this wall was left broken for months and you did not fix it.
As I specified previously, I did not think the wall was broken, no.
Let's talk about August 3rd. You were late to work that day, weren't you?
Correct.
And you noticed all this Milorganite fertilizer went missing.
Yes, it wasn't there.
So you can't account for if this Milorganite fertilizer wasn't used while you weren't there, hence
Well,
the buckets being missing and you being late to work.
Well, I doubt that a large stack of Milorganite buckets could all be placed on the farm in a matter of a morning, but I cannot testify to where they went, no.
these buckets did disappear after this.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Thank you.
The defense, sorry, Your Honor. The defense calls Bobby Polk to the stand. Good evening, Ms. Polk. Can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Bobby Koch, Polk.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a sixth generation farmer and the current owner and proprietor of Polk Farms here in Summer Creek, Florida. I live and work in one of the 4 houses.
Can you tell the jury more about Polk Farms?
Sure. My family's been farming for about 40 years, but we travel around every few years to change crops and produce. My father bought the 20-acre plot of land for Polk Farms when I was younger.
Where is Polk Farms located?
Polk Farms is located at the top of Moore Hill, upstream from the Collmore Preserve.
Do you have a history with the owners of the Collmore Preserve?
The folks in the Collmores were at one time very close, and so we got into a huge argument with them about 15 years ago because we refused to sell them our land. After that, we had non-stop problems with the Collmores.
What kind of problems were these?
Well, I once caught Ellis Collmore sneaking onto our property and vandalizing our
Objection
farms.
relevance.
Not for me. This goes to, this is highly relevant as it goes towards the bias of Ellis Collmore. As we have seen, even so far as 15 years ago, they had already harbored such negative feelings for the corporation of Polk Farms. We believe that this is highly relevant to this.
Your Honor, Ellis Collmore is not being charged with anything today. Therefore, Ellis's bias towards anything would not matter, along with the fact that this fact is not relevant as it happened many, many years ago and has nothing to do with the charges at hand today of the usage of organic fertilizer.
Overruled.
Let me ask the question. What kind of problems were these?
Well, like I said, I caught Ellis Collmore sneaking onto our property and vandalizing one of our barns. The Collmores also filed some complaints against us.
Did anything ever arise from these complaints?
No, nothing ever resulted from the complaints because my father made sure that we were up to go with everything regarding the nearby water supply.
And who taught you how to farm?
My father taught me and my half-sister Reagan how to farm, but she was always taking shortcuts and didn't put in the work necessary for the upkeep of the farm.
Did you ever have to leave the farm?
Yes.
Why is that?
I had to leave in March of 2019 when I got a call from my mother telling me she had thyroid cancer, so I returned to help her.
I'm speaking on prior events.
Oh,
What
I'm so
events-
sorry. I'm sorry. I had to leave for college.
Yes. When you returned, what did the farm look like?
The farm was in shambles.
And how was that?
It was apparent to me that mall organite was used on the property.
Who was in charge of the farm while you were away at college?
Well, while I was away at college, my father left Reagan in charge of the farm.
What is malodorant?
Malodorite is an unnatural type of fertilizer that's supposed to make crops grow faster and stronger.
Did it make the crops grow faster and stronger?
No, it completely ruined the farm because it messed with the chemistry of the soil and ruined the nearby water supply. It's just not a good way to farm.
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, can I? This witness would have personal knowledge in this case, as it is not unreasonable to assume that, and as multiple witnesses have stated, that malodorant can damage soil, can have damaging effects on waterways, and they also have years of experience living on a farm and also working on a farm, so they would have personal knowledge of the effects of malodorant and what it can do.
Your Honor, I believe that this witness will testify to the fact that she never used Milorganite before. So trying to tell about the usage of Milorganite and its effects would be, this witness would be unable to testify to those facts, as well as the fact that she is testifying to the usage of Milorganite, but she never explained how she knew that.
Your Honor, yes, what we will or will not do is relevant, as we have not done it yet. And also, she has laid the foundations for how she knows this, as it's again, she was born on the farm, she's living on the farm, she would know the effects of fertilizer and what it can do.
Overruled.
Okay, maybe ask the question. And what is malodorant?
Malodorite is an unnatural type of fertilizer that's supposed to make crops grow faster and stronger, but it didn't. It ruined the farm, messed with the chemistry of the soil and water supply. It's not a good way to farm.
And so what happened to the farm, and what happened after this incident?
Well, soon after Reagan's ruining the farm and the housing market crashed, my father died of a heart attack in 2009.
What happened to the farm after your father passed away?
We decided to move up to Kentucky to continue cheaper farming operations.
Did you learn to take anything away from this experience?
I have to say that the silver lining to the whole situation is that I vowed to myself to never use Milorganite fertilizer on any crop that I own. It just caused way too many issues in my life.
Did anything significant happen while you returned to Pope Farms?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, the second time I returned to Pope Farms was because I got a call from my mother telling me she had thyroid cancer. So I returned to help her.
When you returned this time around, what did the farm look like?
The farm was a mess, and it was completely overgrown.
And what did you do about this?
I tasked Reagan with fixing up the place, but she didn't put in the work necessary. So we weren't able to continue farming operations in around May of 2019, instead of the usual April.
So what did you do because of Reagan not working as diligently as you would have liked?
I decided to fire Reagan at that point. I also hired some locals to pick up the work and subscribe to monthly organic fertilizer deliveries.
Did you ever have any issues with these monthly organic fertilizer companies?
Things ran smoothly until around July 20th when I received a notification that I had an unauthorized purchase of malorganite fertilizer.
Did you try to cancel the order?
Unfortunately, I received the notification the same day that it was delivered, so I wasn't able to cancel it.
And once the malorganite got on your property, what did you do with it?
I decided not to use it. In fact, I actually texted Reagan at one point, trying to get rid of it. I was trying to unload it on somebody because I did not want the malorganite.
May I approach it with the witness of what has already been admitted into evidence as exhibit number 9? And can you please read the first text bubble you sent to it again?
Sure. I said, you know, anyone willing to take a ton of malorganite off of my hands?
And can you read your second text to it again?
I said, just got the shipment of malorganite that the employees don't know what to do with.
I see. So was the malorganite used while it was on the property?
Definitely not. I clearly hate malorganite.
And so after this incident, did anything significant occur?
Yes, I soon heard that Hurricane Annette was making landfall in Florida. There were some national trajectories that had us just barely inside the cone of projection, but every single local one had us way outside of it.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness and opposing counsel with what has been marked for identification purposes as exhibit numbers 2 and 3? Can you identify these documents, please?
Yes, Exhibit 3 is a local forecast for the hurricane, and Exhibit 2 is a national forecast.
And are these copies or the real thing?
These are copies.
And are these forecasts that you have personally witnessed?
Yes, I saw them on August 1st.
I understand. Your Honor, at this time, may we move exhibit numbers 2 and 3 to evidence?
Objection, hearsay. These are out-of-court forecasts made by weather experts that are not here to testify to the validity of these forecasts here today in court. And this is also being made for the truth of the matter to show where Summer Creek was on this projection.
Your Honor, may I? We are not offering these documents for the truth of the matter, sir, but rather for the effect on the listener, as Bobby herself has witnessed these documents, and because of this, she would take further actions to either lay or not lay fertilizer, as she believes that the hurricane will or will not hit, which is highly relevant to this case.
They are using this for the truth of the matter to show where Summer Creek was in these projection of the forecast. So therefore it would be hearsay, as again it's an out-of-court statement and it's being used for the truth of the matter to show where Summer Creek was on these maps.
Your Honor, may I? We can see that there may be other forecasts that have different predictions as to the ones that are not here, but again, these are not for the truth of the matter, sir. Whether or not these cones are real is not what we're trying to show, but we're trying to show the effect on the listener actually believes these forecasts to be real, and which is highly relevant. And maybe, let me ask you some questions on these documents. And what forecast do you prefer to watch?
I definitely prefer the local news because I find that the national news tries to sensationalize everything.
And what does the local news that you watch predict on hurricane?
Well, every single local news projection that I saw clearly shows Summer Creek outside of the cone of projection.
Your Honor, permission to conform these to the jury?
You want me to go?
Sure. And so while you weren't entirely sure that a hurricane was going to hit Summer Creek, did you take any precautions anyway?
Yes. Obviously, I didn't believe the hurricane would hit, but I still decided to apply fertilizer outside of the prohibited application period because I'm already doing this.
What kind of fertilizer was this?
I saw the entire fertilizer application process, and I know for a fact that organic fertilizer was only used, never malorganite.
Was the malorganite still on the property?
No, I went missing before the application process, so we couldn't have even used it if we wanted to.
Did you try to find it?
No, I figured, we weren't going to use this, there was no point.
Thanks. And so what occurred after Hurricane Annette?
Well, soon after Hurricane Annette, Ellis Collmore peeled into my parking lot and started yelling at me before I even knew it was happening.
What did Ellis say?
Well, she told me that she had been waiting for me to mess up, and that now her land was ruined. She was going to sue us for all that we were worth. She said that Polk Farms would be hers in no time.
What did you do because of this?
Well, I decided to drive down to Collmore Preserve myself to make sure that Ellis wasn't lying to me.
What did you see while on the preserve?
Well, I did see algae in the Summer Creek marshlands, but surprisingly, that was the cleanest part of the preserve. The rest was covered in trash and litter. It was disgusting.
And how long after the hurricane did you notice all of this trash?
I noticed this in early October, so about 2 months later.
And what else did you see while on the preserve?
I also saw a single empty bucket of malorganite fertilizer sitting by a storage unit. I then saw Reagan come out of that storage unit, pick up the bucket of malorganite fertilizer, look at me, and just smirk.
Were there any algae blooms near Polk Farms?
No, I never saw any algae blooms in Summer Creek by Polk Farms or even the Summer Creek River at all.
Is there any possibility that you have ever used malorganite as fertilizer on your property?
On my father's grave, I did not use any malorganite fertilizer on my property, especially not during a prohibited application period.
Thank you. Any further questions, Your Honor?
Thank you, and Brooks?
Yes, Your Honor, may I please report?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Polk. Now, you would say that you're not exactly fond of the Collymores, right?
We've had issues in the past.
And you would say that it can harm your farm when Collymore preserves the business?
I don't believe I stated in my affidavit anywhere.
No, but as a person, you would agree that Collymore preserves being a business can hurt your farm?
How would it hurt my farm? If you mean they're filing complaints against me, I guess so, but them being a business alone does not hurt my farm.
So yes, Collymore preserves can hurt your farm when they're in business, calling the water authorities?
Yes, I guess.
So you would say that it would be beneficial for you to shut down Collymore preserves, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
I'm not asking for an argumentative statement. I'm asking for her own opinion based off of her thoughts about Collymore preserves.
Your Honor, if I may?
Yes.
I'm not objecting to anything the witness may say. I'm objecting to her question.
I'm not asking for an argumentative statement. I'm not asking her to make any conclusions about the charges at hand, but rather her own opinions about the family and this rivalry that we've been testifying to all day.
Your Honor, if I may?
Yes.
And this is the problem as the co-counsel has already made the conclusion before asking the witness.
Yeah, this is cross-examination, so I will be leading the witness, but the witness is welcome to answer any way that she chooses, and I'm not making an argumentative statement as to her own opinions.
Sustained.
Now, when you are aware, you have listened to the testimony from other people today, correct?
Yes.
And you were aware that while Polk Farms was in business, Collymore Preserves had issues with algae, right?
Yes, 15 years ago.
And that when Polk Farms moved away, there were no longer the issues with algae, right?
Sure, yes.
And that when Polk Farms moved back in next door to Collymore Preserves, the issues with algae started again.
Yes, I mean, when the Polk Farms returned, it was under different leadership, and Reagan was fired shortly after, which is one of our employees.
But that is yes, my question.
Yes, sure.
Now, there were buckets of malorganite ordered to your farm, correct?
Unauthorized from the company credit card, yes.
And you ended up storing these in your shed, right?
I never stated that in my affidavit.
But it is extrapolated that you ended up storing these on your property and there were no other places to store them, so you just put them in your shed, right?
I would not say that there's nowhere else to put something on my property. I even stated in my affidavit that I have 4 houses on my property. So no, I would not say that they're in the shed.
Then where did you put the malorganite buckets?
Could be anywhere. If you want me to extrapolate, let's just say right next to the shed.
Alright, so you put them right next to the shed.
Sure, yeah, it's not my affidavit, but sure.
So I'm asking you to extrapolate. You put the buckets of malorganite next to the shed, right?
Yes, not in the shed though.
Now, when you received these buckets of malorganite, you did not try to return them whatsoever, right?
No, I didn't.
You didn't call up the bank and say, hey, can I return these buckets of malorganite, did you?
Well, shortly after finding out that Reagan was the one who made the purchase, I decided to not do that, especially since she left the credit card when she left. When he left. He's my brother, and not going to
taking up your farm, right?
Yes, I thought I could find a use for them other than as fertilizer, such as selling them.
So you were okay, you agree that Milorganite can really hurt the Summer Creek area, right?
Yes.
But you were still fine with selling these buckets to other people and having them hurt Summer Creek, right?
I mean, I never specified that they would be people in Summer Creek, they could be anybody.
So you were going to ship these 90 buckets of Milorganite across the country so that it could hurt another area.
I never said that it would be across the country either. I also don't know how they would use the Milorganite. Even if I returned it, the Milorganite would still be used as fertilizer. That's inevitable unless I delete it from existence.
So I'll revert you back to my question. You were okay with Milorganite being used anywhere, really?
No.
Objection, speculation, Your Honor.
I believe I am simply asking these questions based on this witness's own testimony, and I'm not speculating as to anything. I'm simply asking this witness to elaborate on her previous statements.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Of course. So you were fine with these buckets of Milorganite being used anywhere else, really, right?
Not anywhere else, definitely not on my property, but I wouldn't say I'm fine with it. Like I said, I can't exactly delete them from existence. So my option is to give it to someone else, or I guess return it, which I can do.
So you didn't call the store in which these Milorganite buckets came from to try to return the buckets, right?
No, I thought I could find another use for them.
You didn't talk to the person driving the truck and ask them to take the Milorganite buckets back, right?
No, I didn't. I did not mention on my affidavit, at least.
You didn't do anything to try to get these buckets of Milorganite, which you hated so much, off of your farm, right?
That is completely false. As you can see in the text messages, I tried to find somebody to take them off my hands.
And use these buckets of Milorganite, which you hate so much, right?
Presumably, I guess, yes, but I did not want the Milorganite at any point.
And then eventually all of this Milorganite disappeared, right?
Yes, it went missing.
And you were not there when it disappeared, right?
No.
So you are unsure of if this Milorganite was even used on your property, right?
Well, as I stated in my affidavit earlier, I know what it looks like when Milorganite was used because that happened 15 years ago. So I would know what it looked like when Milorganite was used.
Yet you have no idea if any traces of Milorganite were used on your property, right?
I guess if they used a little tiny square, I'm not sure, but I would know what it looked like if it was actually used.
So you agree that there's a possibility that Milorganite was used on your property and you would have no idea?
Not by any of my employees, but sure.
So that is yes to my question?
Sure.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Amy Gray.
Yes, Your Honor. During your time as owner of Polk Farms, have you ever used Milorganite?
No.
And what kind of fertilizer did you use during the application period?
I exclusively used organic fertilizer. I hate Milorganite.
And what kind of fertilizer did you instruct your employees to use?
Organic fertilizer.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Upton. Any additional witnesses, defense?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests its case.
All right, thank you. Plaintiff, are you ready for your closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I reserve up to 1 minute for rebuttal and allow the time cards to so reflect that?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. May I please support?
Yes.
An uphill battle. The relationship between the Collymores and the Polks was an uphill battle. You have seen today throughout this trial that the destruction of the preserve was more than an act of God. It was more than just naturally occurring. It was due to the negligence of Polk Farms keeping up with their land. Bobby Polk had a duty to keep up with his farm and surrounding area, and he breached this duty. And as a result of Polk Farms' negligence, my client suffered the damages. Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. We, the plaintiff, have presented to you today the facts and evidence that shows the lack of responsibility Polk Farms had, and how this. We called 3 witnesses: Ellis Collymore, Reagan Polk, and Harlan Cannon. You have first heard from Ellis Collymore. Ellis, the owner of the Collymore Preserve, explained how she would never put her preserve or wildlife in harm's way. She explained how she has strict instructions against using Milorganite fertilizer. She told you of the precautions she took before the hurricane and how she she makes sure to keep her preserve healthy and clean. She told you of how the algal blooms only show up when Polk Farms is in business. You then heard from Reagan Polk. Reagan testified to his half-brother Bobby Polk, owner of Polk Farms, ignoring the damage of this broken container wall. Now, this wall was meant to keep out harmful fertilizers from entering healthy waterways. Instead, it was left broken for months, and Bobby Polk ignored the damage. Reagan also testified to his half-brother Bobby Polk using loads of fertilizer just before a hurricane, Milorganite fertilizer. He also testified to the algal blooms only being on the west side of the preserve, the side that connects them to Polk Farms. You then heard from expert Harley McKenna. Harley is an expert in hydrology. She explained through her expertise that the amount of algae at the preserve is more than that would occur naturally, like from a hurricane. She also explained that this container wall, the damage was so severe that it was not able to keep out harmful fertilizers such as Milorganite fertilizer. You then heard from the defense witnesses. You heard from Bobby Polk, who is aware of the damage of the broken container wall, but took no action to fix it, and is aware that there is loads of Milorganite fertilizer on his property, but took no action to get rid of it. You then heard the defense then called Dr. Skylar Foley. Now, Ms. Foley disagrees with Ms. McKenna's results, yet she used her results and findings to come to her conclusion. She will also be getting paid $25,000 for her testimony today. Furthermore, she has only ever testified for the defense, causing bias. Polk Farms violated the Summer Creek Ordinance. They put down over 2 times the amount of fertilizer just before a hurricane, Milorganite fertilizer. This covers negligence per se. Now, negligence. Negligence means that one has not acted reasonably or carefully. When you, the jury, go off to deliberate, I would like you to ask yourself these questions. Would you say that ignoring a faulty separating wall is reasonable or careful? Or that using harmful fertilizers on your land is reasonable or careful? Or that using mass amounts of this fertilizer before a hurricane is reasonable or careful? When you, the jury, go off to deliberate, please keep these things in mind. Remember the constant uphill battle that the Collymores have been fighting with the family atop the hill. Remember that they have their livelihoods at stake. Remember to find Polk Farms liable of negligence and negligence per se. Thank you.
Your Honor, while we recognize per the mock trial rules, we are not allowed to object during closing statements. If I would have been allowed to object, I would have objected to facts, non-evidence, and speculation. No response, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. Today you have borne witness to a case brought by the plaintiff, Collymore Preserve, against the defendant, Polk Farms, where conclusions drawn by the Collymore Preserve were made callously and with very little regard for facts and evidence. Collymore Preserve wished to paint Polk Farms as negligent, greedy, and uncaring. But what you, the jurors, have been quickly able to ascertain is that this story they are trying to tell does not tell the full story. Unlike the plaintiff, we as a defense demonstrated a holistic view of the events leading up to this case that demonstrated that Polk Farms is not the negligent actors that Collymore Preserve would like you to believe. I would remind you that the plaintiff, and the plaintiff only, holds the burden in this case and has not proven their case by the greater weight of the evidence, and therefore Polk Farms cannot be liable for negligence and negligence per se. Today the plaintiff called the CEO and owner of Collymore Preserve, Alice Collymore, to the stand. Alice Collymore admitted that their own employee, Reagan Polk, spread Milorganite fertilizer in the area where the algae blooms are most heavily concentrated. Now, Reagan Polk claims that she has never used Milorganite, but this begs the question that if the plaintiff cannot agree on the story they are trying to tell, then how can they ask you, the jurors, to agree to their story in the first place? Next, you heard from their witness, Harley McKenna, whose insufficient and lackluster testing brings shame into this case, as they negated to test the crucial point of Murphy's Bend. McKenna's own integrity has been called into question during this case, as they have testified that no new evidence would change their mind. Ask yourself if this is how a reasonable actor in the scientific community should behave. Moving on to the defense, we called our own expert witness, Dr. Skylar Foley.
whose hours into this case were not in vain, actually demonstrated that the chemicals found in the Collingwood Preserve were naturally occurring, and that the animal deaths were more than likely caused by the PTE levels found in the preserve due to their trash-ridden property. Next, you heard from Mr. Claude Bryant, whose years of living alongside both the plaintiff and the defense give her the qualifications to speak on his case, who has demonstrated Reagan Polk's poor work ethic and the grudge Collingwood Preserve continues to harbor for Polk Farms. And lastly, you heard from the current owner of Polk Farms, Bobby Polk. Bobby Polk's own personal dealings with her mother's cancer would never cause her to wish harm on another family, whose meticulousness and attention to detail caused her to lay fertilizer before a prohibited application period, and only organic fertilizer was utilized. There is no evidence whatsoever that Polk Farms has ever used malorganite, as when they surprisingly received a shipment of it after Reagan Polk took his liberties with Bobby's credit card, the malorganite was never utilized, and Bobby Polk did her best to get the malorganite off the property. Today, jurors, you are able to ascertain that the science does not prove the plaintiff's case. Their own witnesses do not prove their case, and yet we must beg the question of why. Why bring this case against Polk Farms? And the answer is simple, in that anytime our livelihoods are hurt, we can feel angst, anxiety, and stress. And this can cause us to make haste with our decisions. You see, Collingwood Preserve began with a conclusion, and thusly worked backwards to justify this conclusion, regardless of evidence. Today, jurors, I would implore you to look at all of the evidence and all of the statements made, and know that the plaintiff has not proven their case by the greater weight of the evidence, and that Polk Farms is not liable for negligence or negligence per se, and that an age-old feud does not give you the right to upend someone's life for the sake of saving face. Thank you.
Well, the defense stated that we're not telling the whole truth. We're not telling the whole story. The truth is in the evidence before you. The broken container wall that Ms. Harvey McKenna said is not sufficient enough to keep out harmful fertilizers from coming through, as you can see. Bobby Polk sent out a memo to all the workers at her farm. Put out all the malorganite just before the hurricane. What was this fertilizer? Malorganite fertilizer. The evidence is here before you. Find Polk Farms liable of negligence and negligence per se. Thank you.
All right, let me ask each team if there are any additional matters that the court needs to address.
No, Your Honor.
I do not believe there are any additional matters the defense wishes to address at this time.
All right, very good. Well, let me turn to the audience and ask for